Morning people, welcome back to F Politics. I just messaged Jeremy Corbyn on Twitter to discuss his new party, and he will see those messages because he follows me on Twitter. I know, insane. After all the stuff that I've said about Jeremy Corbyn for the last 7 years, the man still follows me. I don't get it either. But I'm hoping that the fact that he still follows me means he respects my views on him and is open-minded to hearing what I have to say. Because last night he said this:
the alternative of a left independent party, of a socialist view that's being put. There's a lot of people all around the country in different independent groups. You look in Birmingham, look in Liverpool, look in Southport and so on. There is a thirst for an alternative view to be put. I'm working with all of those people. That grouping will come together. There will be an alternative view and there will be an alternative put there, which is about a society that deals with poverty, inequality, and a foreign policy that's based on peace rather than war.
And would you like to lead that group?
I'm here to work, I'm here to serve the people in the way I've always tried to do.
And last night, Zarah Sultana, who's now an ex-Labour MP, tweeted that she's leaving the Labour Party to co-lead this new party with Jeremy Corbyn, saying that the billionaires of the world already have 3 parties in the UK that speak for them. It's time for the people to have one that speaks for us. And because out of the 2 of them, Jeremy Corbyn is the one that follows me, he's the one who I messaged, and this is what I said. Mr. Corbyn, my views on how you handled Brexit are no secret. However, if you and Zarah Sultana publicly campaign to end this 2-party system by delivering a proportional voting system and agree to an electoral pact with the Greens to avoid splitting the vote in favour of Labour and reform, then I will give Zarah Sultana my full support and we could enter a new era of lefty politics where we are no longer at each other's throats. And we can mount an effective opposition to the right, and in this new era, we will win, because the majority of Brits have voted left of Tory in almost every single election since World War II. I really hope you share this vision. Sincerely, Femi. And let's get this out of the way to anybody thinking that smaller parties like Greens, Lib Dems, or even this new party started by Jeremy Corbyn and Zarah Sultana risk splitting the vote and helping reform take over by taking the votes away from Labour. My message to you is, look at America, because in 2020 there was an election where everybody who was broadly speaking progressive banded together to prevent Trump getting a second term in office. And that's how Biden got in for his first term. But during those 4 years, the Democrats did not do enough to win the trust of working class people, and they weren't able to replicate that energy of we have to stop Trump again because it had already been spent. And that's how we have a far-right Trump administration now doing whatever the hell it likes, arresting people, blackbagging people, all the stuff that you're seeing on the news. That is what's in store for us if Keir Starmer's Labour Party doesn't do enough for working class people, allowing Nigel Farage to sweep up all the votes from the Tories and Labour. And as I've said before, there are only 2 things Labour can do to prevent that from happening. They either drastically improve people's living standards in a way that they can feel and thank them for, but that will require addressing inequalities in ways that they've ruled out, like taxing the rich to feed the poor, and it'll involve improving the economy by doing things like rejoining the EU single market, which again they've ruled out. And the other way to prevent Nigel Farage from becoming Prime Minister, even though his party's only likely to get about 26% of the vote, is for Labour to right now change the voting system so that all votes count equally, so that Reform won't be able to get a majority of seats in Parliament based on only 1/3 of the votes. But again, Starmer has ruled that out. So there should be no gently with Labour. We should be applying maximum political pressure to Labour to get them to change. Because unless they change, Nigel Farage will be our next Prime Minister. So right now, our public position should already be that unless Labour gives us a proportional voting system where all votes count equally so that our progressive voting public is accurately reflected in Parliament, we will not vote Labour. And up until yesterday, that would mean voting Green, Lib Dem, SNP or Plaid. But we are still dealing with the first past the post voting system where we are right now, which is why my message to Jeremy Corbyn was he needs an electoral pact with the Greens. Because otherwise they'll just split the genuinely progressive vote and help either Reform or Labour take power. And just so you appreciate what it means for someone like me, despite my feelings about Jeremy Corbyn, to be willing to work with him, this is what the leader of the Labour Party should have said on the morning of the referendum result. Good morning, people of the UK. The majority, 52% of voters, just voted to leave the EU. However, during this campaign, the Leave campaign has presented many different options for how we should leave the EU, what relationship we should have with the EU after Brexit. Some of you want to have a simple free trade deal. Some of you want to have no trade deal at all. Some of you want to have a free trade deal, but with single market access. And it's not mathematically possible to please all of you. Therefore, I propose that we have a period of public consultation. Each MP should go to their constituency and hold a town hall, ask their constituents what kind of relationship they want to have with the EU. Afterwards, those MPs will then come back to Parliament and represent their constituents' wishes. Parliament will then, from that, develop a negotiating strategy with the EU, and then will negotiate on behalf of the British people. Once that deal is negotiated, that will then be put towards the people in a second referendum between that deal and remaining in the EU to make sure that whatever we just negotiated is actually more popular than remaining in the EU. That is how you democratically handle Brexit. Instead, we got...
The single market is dependent on membership of the EU. What we've said all along is that we want a tariff-free trade, access to the European market and a partnership with Europe in the future.
But to be absolutely crystal clear, we leave the single European market because we leave the EU.
The two things are inextricably
so we have to leave the single market.
Yes.
Your members want to be inside the single market, and they want to be inside the customs union, and they want a second referendum. Why do you not listen to them about these things?
Yes, the membership of the Labour Party overwhelmingly voted to remain. Overwhelmingly, Labour supporters voted to remain, but a third of them didn't. A third of them voted the other way. I want to win the next election.
Which is why this isn't the first open letter I've ever written to Jeremy Corbyn. I wrote one in 2017.
Dear Jeremy Corbyn, I'm not a Corbynite. I love almost all of your policies. I especially love the principles behind them. You ran a great campaign and I did vote for you. But you don't have my full support. A, the overall benefit to the economy of the single market means that the minimum wage will buy more. And given the fall in the pound, that's definitely worth considering. And B, the fact that if we make it more expensive to trade into Europe, then not only will only the biggest companies be able to do that, but with this new global Britain drive, it won't be the small and medium-sized companies that benefit. It'll be the largest companies who can afford to export to Japan, to America, and to the Commonwealth countries. Now, we need international deals. If the UK doesn't trade abroad, our economy dies and you won't be able to fund the public services you want. But if the problem with globalization is that it can lead to ordinary working people being left behind, then giving such a major advantage to the larger companies while cutting off the ability for medium-sized companies to compete in Europe, that only makes it worse.
And that damage that I warned Jeremy Corbyn about is exactly what came to pass. Despite me giving up everything in my life, including my own personal safety, to try and get him to stop. So when I tell you that I'd be willing to work even with Jeremy Corbyn to get rid of a voting system that consistently gives us governments that are more right-wing than the majority of the British people, you should hear me. But while we're here, in the interest of honesty and building relationships, I should apologise to Jeremy Corbyn. Back in the 2018-19 period, when all this stuff was going on about Jeremy Corbyn being anti-Semitic, failing to deal with anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, because I was Mr. Stop Brexit and it was my only concern, even though I, in my head, believed that Jeremy Corbyn was failing on anti-Semitism, I deliberately tried to downplay the accusations of anti-Semitism against Jeremy Corbyn on the basis of, well, if his problem is he's failed to stop anti-Semitism, whereas on the other side, the other option in the 2019 election was Boris Johnson, who has actively supported racism, then if you're making your voting decisions based on not wanting bigotry in government, then obviously Jeremy Corbyn is the choice. But I deleted that tweet immediately after the 2019 election because I felt dirty. I felt like I was covering up bigotry because in my head, I did believe that Jeremy Corbyn had a problem with anti-Semitism. But given what was at stake with Brexit, I thought that that mattered more. And we are talking about an election in December 2019, so basically a month and a half before COVID really hit the UK. And that election decided whether or not Brexit would go ahead after the British Medical Association had said that a no-deal Brexit would make us more vulnerable to deadly pandemics. And Brexit did damage the NHS during the pandemic, and studies show that it cost about 1,500 lives per year. So I don't regret prioritizing that over the accusations against Jeremy Corbyn for anti-Semitism. What I do regret is who I allowed to form my opinion on whether or not Jeremy Corbyn had a problem with anti-Semitism. Namely, Luciana Berger, who I spoke to, and she explained how there were Facebook groups that were set up in Jeremy Corbyn's name that had lots of anti-Semitism in them, and that she went to Jeremy Corbyn, tried to get him to shut that shit down, and he didn't. And she was a Jewish MP who'd had to leave the Labour Party, and so I took her at her word. And for the record, in 2019, my knowledge of Palestine was shamefully non-existent. So seeing Luciana Berger recently on LBC saying that Palestine Action, the protest group, should be declared a terrorist organization, it's made me want to revisit my thinking. Because of how Jeremy Corbyn had handled Brexit, my trust in him as a person was absolute zero at the time. Because relative to most of the people that you see on TV, I am an expert on the EU and Brexit. So I knew that Jeremy Corbyn was fucking up. And so because my expertise told me that Jeremy Corbyn was willing to do things that I knew would hurt lots and lots of people, and because at the time I I wasn't yet aware of the extent to which the accusation of being anti-Semitic could be weaponized to criticize anybody who opposes the actions of the Israeli government. When those accusations were made against Jeremy Corbyn, he got absolutely zero benefit of the doubt from me. So even though when Jeremy Corbyn ultimately backed a second referendum, I did promote tactically voting for Labour under him, and I even defended him against the accusations of anti-Semitism before the election. The views I held privately about him before the election, and one tweet that I put out after the election, I now believe those views were wrong, and for that I do apologize. Like I said, if we get a voting system where all votes count equally, then progressive votes will be accurately reflected in Parliament and we will be the majority. And because we'll have governments based on coalitions of multiple parties, we'll be able to have multiple different progressive voices that won't all agree, but won't see each other as an existential threat anymore. And so we will have better politics and will no longer be at each other's throats on the left. And so again, my question to Zarah Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn is, are you going to fight for a proportional voting system where all votes count equally so we can end this two-party system? And are you going to work with parties like the Greens to deliver that? Please give us the kind of politics that this country desperately needs. I'm Femi. Make sure you follow F Politics, a politics as an FU. Have a great week.